Hello.
Okay, we're going to finish Bava Metziah tonight, and we're going to start Bava Basra tomorrow night, and I'm going to try to finish Bava Kama tonight, because we have a block and a half left. We'll see how we go today.
Okay.
We are on Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, the Mishnah.
Yeah.
L'chein Beis Abachu Boni Basela. Person has a wine press building in a cave. V'gina achas lagabo. A garden is growing above. V'nifchas. The roof fell and the garden fell into the first story. Hari balagina yord v'zor lamata. The one who owns the garden can plant seeds in the first story. Ad sheyasa lebeis bado kipin. Until the guy who owns the olive press rebuilds his structure so he has a ceiling. New halacha. A wall or a tree fell into the public domain and it did damage. It's an accident, so they don't have to pay. But let's say Bezdin gave him a warning to cut the tree because it was leaning over, or to destroy the wall because it was a leaning wall. And then they fell. So if they gave him 30 days to correct it, and it fell b'soch hazman, potter. If it fell achar hazman, chayiv. Somebody has a wall next to the garden of a friend. V'amar lo, the owner of the garden says, Panei avanecha, get your stones out of my garden. And the owner of the wall says, Higiyucha, listen, you can keep it. So ain't shaman lo. He has to get rid of the stones from the guy's garden. He can't just be mafkir to him. However, mishikabel, let's say the owner of the garden agrees to take the stones, then Amr lo, give me your expenses, and I will take Vaniyat Shali. Ain't shaman lo. He can't take him back because he already gave it to his friend b'matana.
Hold on, Eddie. Sorry, I'm late, but we're holding on.
Kufyud Ches, Omer Al. We're halfway through the Mishnah.
Okay.
Asoicher Sapoel, you hire a worker. Las Osimo B'Tevno Kash. He's going to work with you to pick up straw. V'Omer Lo Tenli Schari, and he asks for his wages. V'Omer Lo, Hol Mashasisa B'Scharecha, take whatever you collected in straw as your payment. Ain't showing low. He doesn't have to accept that. He wants cash. But Mishakibel, if he accepted it, and then the Balabayas wants the straw and wants to pay him cash, ain't showing low. Once the worker had a kinyan in it, then it's his. The first case of the Mishnah was a person has an olive press, and he has a second story, and the guy on the second story has a garden. And the roof collapsed, and the Mishnah said that the guy who has the garden can go into the first floor and plant his garden. So when it says nifchasa, how much? Rav Amar Beruba. He can go down if it's a 51% loss of the roof. Shmuel Amar Barba Amos, just 4 Amos. Rav Amar Beruba, of Arba Amos, it's not, he doesn't have a claim. A person will be matriach to plant some of the seeds on an upper story and some of the seeds on a lower story. Because now, that's the same halacha we learned yesterday about just somebody dwelling up there. So why do I need the machlokas in both cases? Tricha. Yeshmin and Dira, if we only talked about someone living upstairs, but how come Shmuel? That's when Shmuel says a person will live with Arba Amos broken. Mishum Delavidi Portach, a person is going to live Nishtahi Nishtaher. Aval inyan zriya, when it comes to planting, a person will go up here and down there. Maybe there, Rav, that he's not allowed to move down unless it's 51%. If we would have only been told the machlokas here by the zriya, maybe maybe by a dira, Rav will agree to Shmuel that already by Arba Amois he can go down. So we needed tzricha in both cases. Then the Mishnah said if you have a tree or a wall that collapses into the Rishus Harabim, nobody has to pay because it's an accident. However, if the public authorities told him to cut down the tree and to break down the wall because they're a danger and he doesn't do it, and then they fall, so then he has to pay. And the Mishnah said, Nostalo Zman. And if it's within the Zman, then he doesn't have to pay. If it's after the Zman that they gave him to correct it, he has to pay. Kama Zman based in. Amrav Yechnon Shloishim Yom, 30 days. Then it says, Misha Yekoslu Samoch. We talked about a wall being next to a garden. And you can't go back on what you said, keep the stones or don't keep it. So Hamad Seifa, here, I'll give you your expenses, give me back the stones. We're talking about a case where the owner of the garden already moved the stones. So time of the paninu. Halo paninu, lo. So if he didn't remove the stones, they're still considered to be owned by the owner of the wall. Now, amai, why does the owner of the garden have to do a maisa? V'tikne lesadeu. We know that a chotzer acquires things on behalf of a person. Let the guy's field, the balagina, the owner of the garden, let his garden acquire the avonim without any kind of action like hagbah. Dom Rav Yosef Rechanina Chatzer Shalom Korelo Afilu Shalom Idaito. A Chatzer acquires things even without your das. So yeah, but you have to have kavana. Then the Sodeh will be koine it without a special kinyan. The owner of the wall wanted the owner of the garden to deal with the avodim. And therefore he was like a delay tactic, so he didn't want him to be koine right away. Then we said, if you rented somebody to gather straw, so we have the same, if he agreed to be paid in salary, you can't go back on that. So, utzricha, why do I need the same machlokas? If we've only had a case about the wall that fell into a garden, when the guy says, listen, you deal with it, ain't shoymin lo. He doesn't get any reward for that. And they don't have any dealings with each other. They just happen to be neighbors. Here he hired him as a worker. We knew to listen to Amri Inchi. Listen, you listen to the guy who pays you. So we say, no. When do we not listen? Because he's being paid. About the Leslie Agragave, he may, because there's no payment, Sharmin low, and maybe he can go back on the deal. So tzricha, we have to be showed the machlokas in both cases. Then, if you pay the worker and he wants to switch to straw, ain't Sharmin low. Ivatanya Sharmin low. Amrav Nachman loy kasha. When you don't listen to the guy who wants to change the terms, is b'shalo, is when he's doing work for him. Time b'shal chaveru, or he's working for a third party. B'shalo my time and ishomalo. Why don't we listen if he's working for him? I'm paying you. B'shal chaveru nami tzchar alav. What do you mean? If the worker is hired and then he does work in another person's field, in the end he's going to get paid too. The Tanya. You hired a worker to work in your field. but he made a mistake. He showed him the field of his neighbor, and he worked there. He has to pay the worker full salary. Later on, your neighbor was benefited, you can get money out of him. So it makes no difference for the worker who he's going to work for. He's going to get paid. Khan, when the worker's working for the balabais, and Khan b'shel hefker. It's not a neighbor, he's working for hefker. He told him to gather up straw from hefker. And then he told him, keep it yourself, as opposed to being paid. So, Eisvei Rav Nachman, what do you mean? Metzias per la'atzmoi. What a worker finds he can keep. When the balabais told him to do a specific job, like take out weeds with me today, or oder imo or hoe with me, that then, if the worker happens to find something, he can keep it. So here, the worker was hired to gather straw. The straw will be coined to the balabayas. Avalim Omer lo aseimi malacha yomi. He gave him general terms. Mitzias balabayas. Then whatever he finds goes to the balabayas. So El Omer of Nachman loy kasha kan ba'agba. One type of job was to lift the straw. Then he becomes like the shliach of the balabayas. He's working for the balabayas. Kan ba'avota. He's being told to just watch the straw that it doesn't get stolen. Then he was not koine it for the balabais. And everything's hefker. And therefore he can claim that he was zoich in that straw. Omer Rabba, regarding habata, the hefker tanoi. This issue is whether he's koine when he's told to guard something of hefker, that's machlekes tanoi, this not. Shomrei sfichei shvius. Guards were hired during Shemitah to guard fields where things were growing on their own, particularly the first barley, where they had to harvest some barley for the Minchas HaOmer. Noitlin schar mitrumas alishka. They get paid from the Beis HaMikdash's money because it's a tzorech mikdash. Rabbi Yossi Omer, you don't have to hire watchers. You can accept donations of barley. So then ein bar mishal tzibur. So then it's coming from a yachid. And how can we do that? Is it maybe my lav ba'kamiflaki, the Tana Kamasavar, avata behefker kani, that when you watch something that's hefker, the shomer acquires it, even though he wasn't magbiya it. So the iyavile igra, that they pay him from the tzibur, so then it belongs to the tzibur in the low. If they wouldn't pay him, then it wouldn't belong to the tzibur. And since it's a korban tzibur, it's got to be a korban tzibur. Rather, Rabbi Yossi said, "Rabbi Hefker loikani." Just watching something in hefker does not acquire it. When the tzibur brings it, then the tzibur acquires it. Umata oimer in the Mishnah, kachi kamerle, midvarech lidvarenu. Based on what you said to what we said, that ein oimer shtei lechem boy mishol tzibur. You don't need it doesn't have to be owned by the tzibur. So is that the machlokes omer of a low? We can get out of that. Really, kula mahabata befker kani. Really, a shomer who watches something can acquire it. Hacha, it's a different machlokes. Whether it'll be given over to the tzibur with a full heart. We give the shomer payment. Because the if he's donating it, in his heart, he thinks it belongs to him, and it's really a korban yachid, and it doesn't belong to the tzibur, and there's a deficiency in the korban tzibur. Rabbi Yossi said, we don't have to be worried about that. Umata oimer, hachi kamer lemidvarecha, lidvarenu the chayshin and shem Elohim yafa yafa. No, doesn't make a difference if the private individual is not going to give it over with a full heart, because ein oimer shnelechem boy mishal tzibur, doesn't have to belong to the tzibur. Ikedi Amri, other people learn it with a different lashon. Rava Amar, Kula Ma'avota Be'efker Loikani. A shomer watching something doesn't acquire it. Hacha Chayshin Labali Zroitz Kamiflugi. We're worried about mafia guys who are going to come and take the grain for themselves. The Tanakama server, the Kinu Rabbanon Lamesu Le'ar Bezuzi, they made a takara to pay the shomer some money. Once the shomer tells these mafia guys that he's working for Hegdish, they're not going to take it. Rabbi Yossi said, "Lo takinu, we're not choishesh." And a private individual can watch it without being taken from Hegdish. And then the Mishnah says, "Umata oimer hachi kamer mivarech l'dvarenu ein boy mishal tzibur." You can accept it from a private person because it doesn't have to be bought from tzibur. V'chein ki yasser ravin. The nafkamina is this issue of whether we're fearful of these mafia guys. Okay. Mishnah. Hamoitzi zevel rishus harabim. You're removing fertilizer into the rishus harabim. Hamotzi motzi v'mezabel mezabel. You got to get rid of it. You can't leave it there for a long time. One brings it out, and the other takes it to where it has to be. And ein shorn tit b'shus harabim. You can't leave like clay. Vein loivnim leveinim. You can't make bricks in b'shus harabim. Aval goivlim tit b'shus harabim. This goes very quickly. Aval loy leveinim. That takes a long time, and the people are not going to be able to use b'shus harabim properly. What if somebody wants to build Rishus Harabim? Hamevi avani maybe he can bring stones. The haboina but you got to build it right away. The mizik mashal mashizik. If you do damage to somebody, you got to pay. Rav Shimon Gamliel oimer af metakin was malachto with neshloshim yom. You can prepare prior to 30 days before you're building. Lema masnisin deloik Rav Yehuda. The Tanya Rav Yehuda oimer. During the seasons where you could take your dung and put it to the outside, you wanted people to walk on it, makes the zevel better. It's for this reason that Yoshua gave Klal Yisrael Eretz Yisrael. It's a general rule that everybody benefits from. So afilu tamer Rav Yehuda. We can argue that our Mishnah is Rav Yehuda. Moed Rav Yehuda, that Shem Hizik Chayiv L'Shalim, that you have to pay if you did damage. Ayvatnan Moed Rav Yehuda b'Ner Chanukah Shu Potter. If you put Ner Chanukah out and caused a fire, you're Potter b'Nei Shu Oiseh B'Rishus, you're allowed to do it. My law, because you have Rishus Bezdin? No. Lo, Ksham is Rishus Mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to put it outside, so you're potter. But if you did it, something without a mitzvah, then you have to pay what you damaged. Those who say that you're allowed to do some kind of damage to Sarabim, still in Hizik Chayv L'Shalim, you have to pay. Rav Yehuda pointer. Rav Yehuda is potter even there, if you have Rishus. Our mission is not like Rav Yehuda. Rabaya, that in a place where you have Rishus, you're potter to pay. Rav Yehuda, Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon Kulas Filu, B'Shitakas, they all hold the Makam Shenoslu Chachamim Rishus, the Hizik potter. Chachamim give you the right to do something, and damage was caused, you don't have to pay. Rav Yehuda Adamaran, we just said the case of Rav Yehuda. Rav Shimon Gamliel Desnan, Rav Shimon Gamliel Oimer, you can already start preparing your building site in Rishus Harabim 30 days before. Rabbi Shimon said, I am Amidu Baliyah. If you put an oven on the second story, you have to make sure that the ceiling of the second story is covered with some kind of waterproofing. At least shlosha tfachim, because the tanner will, through heat, will burn through the beam and do damage to the person living next door, downstairs. But if it was a kira, if it was a small oven, then you only need the thickness of the ceiling, tefach. But im hizik, mishal mashe hizik. But Rabbi Shimon Omer lo amru kol hashim alalu, el hashim hizik pater b'lashan. The shiurim were given that if you did that type of protective thing between you and the bottom, then you wouldn't have to pay if it did that. Ton Rabbanon. Hachatziv, somebody who cuts stones out of a quarry. Shemosr l'sate, that gave it over to a stone maker. Hasatet chayiv. The stone maker is not chayiv. Hasatet shemosr l'chamer. After the stone maker, the stone worker, gives it to the donkey driver to bring the stone material. So hachamer chayiv. So the achrayus transfers to the transport person. Hachamer shemosr l'katev. Now you have to give it over to somebody who carries by his shoulder. Hakatev chayiv. He has to have the achrayus. Hakatev shemosr l'banoi. The one who schleps the stones to the contractor. Now the contractor, habanoi chayiv. Habanoi shemosr l'adrikal, to the carpenter. Adrikal chayiv. V'miniach even al adimus. V'zika, if the stone was placed where it's supposed to be and it did damage by falling, kulan chayav l'shon, they all have to pay. I vatanya achron chayav. What do you mean? He said only the last guy's chayav. The kulan paturim. Like kasha kan b'schius. When you rent these people, then only the last one is chayav. B'kablanus, if they're all hired as a contractor, then they're all chayav the same. Last Mishnah. Shtei ginos zogavzu. Two gardens, one on top of the other. One is lower, one is higher. Yerek ben tayim. There's a vegetable growing in between the two gardens. Rameir Emer, the vegetable belongs to the Shel Elyon. Rav Yehuda Omer Shel Tachton. Rav Meir. Im yirtza Elyon. If the one who lives above wants to dig, v'likech hasafaro, and take the dirt where the vegetable is planted, then ein kan yerek. Rav Yehuda Ratza Tachton Lamalas is ginoso. If the guy who has the lower garden wants to fill his garden with dirt, then also in Kadyer. They each sort of have power of the other, so that the vegetable will not exist. So Roy Mechan Yerek Zechai. We see where is it getting its nourishment. If its nourishment comes from the bottom or the top. And that's where we decide who has achrayus. Rav Shimon, if the one who lives above can easily pull out his hand and take, otherwise, Ashar Shel Tachton. Amrava bi'ikaro, regarding the root, the dirt belongs to the one above. We're talking about the leaves that are in the airspace of the lower garden. Rav Meir Savar Shadi Noifa Basari Karo. The leaves follow the root. So everything belongs to the above. Rav Yehuda Savar Lo Amrin and Shadi Noifa Basari Karo. We don't hold that principle. V'azul Tamayu. The Tanya. Hayotzim and Agezom and Ashroshim. The tree belongs to one person that's growing in the ground of another person. That which comes out of the trunk and the roots, Hare'elu shel balakarka, Divrei Meir, belongs to the owner of the land. So we see even the leaves follow the root. Rav Yehuda Omer, no. That which comes from an ageza is bala'ilam, belongs to the owner of the tree. That which grows directly from the roots, binat shoshim shel balakarka. The same din applies by Orla, where there's a prohibition the first 3 years. A tree that's growing out of the bark or out of the roots, out of an old tree, it's like a new tree. No, it's considered like a branch of the old tree. We need the machlokes in both places. The Yashmin Kamaisa, Haisyomer Bahakam Rav Yehuda Mishum de Mamoina. It's monetary to divide between the two people. Aval gabi orla de isura. It's isur veheter, ema moida leil Rav Meir. Maybe he's machmir, like Rav Meir. Maybe Rav Meir is stringent. But monetary issues, by ema moida leil Rav Yehuda, so tzricha. Rav Shimon. Kol sha'an yachal lipshot yadav. If the upper guy can reach out his hand without problems and pull, it belongs to him. Rav Dvei Rav Yanai, Levat Shlo Yenas, he can't stretch too hard, very easily. Boy Rav Anan v'itema Rav Yirmiyah, Magia lenoifoi ve'en magia likaro. The upper guy can only reach the leaves and not to the root. Or magia likaro ve'magia lenoifoi. Or vice versa, can only reach the root but not the leaves. My. So teku. And then here we'll stop. Okay.
Yeah.
Tonight we were supposed to finish Bava Metziah, and we finished. Now, I would like to go.
Ernie,
Yes, sir.
you gave a shir last night about the lost